the week of December 16th to December 23rd is really a pivotal week because it is a week that holds the solstice. And so in the northern hemisphere, we are coming into that peak dark time of the year when the days are shortest and the night is longest. That is especially the case here in the Pacific Northwest where I live. And I love the solstice for that rebirth of the sun and knowing that that light of the sun will start increasing. Of course, you may be in the southern hemisphere where this is a summer solstice we are approaching, but no matter where you live, the solstice is such a magical moment. And that is something that we will be experiencing with this week's astrology. In many ways, it is the renewal and regeneration of the year ahead. There are some important aspects this week. And in fact, this is a week where we actually have some very harmonious, positive, generative aspects to actually talk about. And another reason why this is significant is in recent weeks, there have just been a lot of very extreme astrological aspects happening, many of which have been pretty difficult. This week, there are not as many of those. And that's a really big thing to think about and take advantage of. Some of you may just need more rest, and you may want to take more time to seek pleasure and restoration. But you also may be needing to get work done. And so I love the astrology this week for being really supportive of focusing in on some productive growth. In addition, it's very helpful for thinking about long term plans and thinking about the work and the creations that you want to put into effect and develop in this year ahead. So recently, we had this very visionary, extreme in many ways, full moon in Gemini. It was out of bounds in northern declination. It was conjoining Jupiter. It was in a very catalytic aspect with Neptune, and Mercury was stationing direct at the same time. So as I'm recording this video, which is on Sunday, December 15th, Mercury has just stationed direct. And so that stationing direct of Mercury to begin this week is really the most important initial theme. Now, as the week begins, Mercury is still not really moving forward, but will increasingly each day start picking up speed and start picking up movement. And whatever process you've been in with Mercury retrograde since back at the end of November, it's stationed retrograde on November 25th. You've maybe been led to new insights about yourself, patterns you want to change, new ideas you want to develop. Perhaps for some of you, the combination of that with Mars retrograde at the same time has resulted in some delays, things not coming together as quickly as you were hoping. Mars is still retrograde and will be for a long time. But now that Mercury is direct, there should be some good momentum that you can get going forward. Now, the other thing, besides Mercury stationing direct, is that Mars is retrograde and getting closer and closer to an opposition with Pluto. The good thing is that opposition with Pluto doesn't get too tight until more like next week and then the week after that. It's really the end of this year and the beginning of the new year, early January 2025, where that Mars Pluto becomes more extreme. And so it is an intensification that's going on in the background. But this week, we've already been adjusting to Mars retrograde the past couple of weeks. It's not going to be as intense. However, as we'll talk about, the moon is going to activate the Mars Pluto this week. And so we will need to pay attention to that. But I think the combination of Mercury stationing direct, coming into this beautiful solstice, I think we're going to be able to do a lot of recovery and restoration. And like I said, make some real forward progress with whatever we need to really get done. This full moon that we just experienced was very powerful, and it was connected to much larger astrological cycles, such as the Jupiter and Saturn cycle, such as the Saturn and Neptune cycle. Plus, Mercury is stationing direct at the same time. And so as we come into the start of this week, we very well may have picked up some additional revelations from this full moon that connect with much larger patterns of change that we want to act on, not only in the year ahead, but honestly in the years ahead. This is information that could be coming to us this week, much longer term ideas of goals and dreams we have, things that we really want to create with our lives that may not be exactly in our reality right now and closely within reach, but that we can work towards. One of those reasons is the fact that Jupiter and Saturn are getting closer and closer to their second exact square aspect. That'll happen actually next week on December 24th. But by the end of this week, they will be practically forming a square aspect. And that Jupiter Saturn cycle is connected to a whole 20-year cycle ahead. And so the combination of that full moon activating them and Mercury moving direct this week and moving towards them, keep in mind that dreams and visions you have of what you want to create for your future can be really legitimate and not just wishful thinking. They can become real and things you can really work toward. It's really going to be configuring, practical, pragmatic plans for how to make that happen. And so on Monday, December 16th, it's really a beautiful start to the week. If you're somebody that has a Monday to Friday type of job and this is the start of your work week, this is a great day. The moon is in Cancer. She's in her own sign. She doesn't have any difficult aspects going on. But as the day begins, essentially, the moon is moving towards a trine aspect with Saturn in Pisces. This is more of a integrative aspect, passing, of course, aspect between the moon and Saturn. But that combination of the moon being in Cancer, being in her own sign, being in a sign that can really initiate things and get things moving and make some things happen, making some nice connections. The trine to Saturn can really be practical and pragmatic and really help you focus on what needs to be taken care of. So I love it for that at the start of this week. Then on Tuesday, the moon gets towards the end of Cancer and then will later in the day enter Leo. So I want to talk a little bit more about the moon being in Leo. But around this time, the moon is in Cancer and she is moving from the sextile aspect with Uranus and Taurus, who's in the moon's exaltation, and she's moving towards a trine aspect with Neptune. So this day is beginning with potential for great insights, revelations, big inspirations, and could really help you tap into a larger vision of things you really want to bring about in your life. Now, the thing about Tuesday, though, is keeping in mind that it is the day of Mars, and Mars is retrograde early on in Leo. We are going through a experience here with the moon where as soon as she is moving out of Cancer and entering Leo, she's going to run into this opposition with Pluto, and then an opposition with Ceres, and then a conjunction with Mars retrograde. And then she'll move out of that eventually into an opposition with Venus. And so in the Pacific time range, this will happen around 3:39 p.m. This is more like 6:40 p.m. in the Eastern time zone. But when that moon enters Leo, she'll oppose Pluto and then move towards this opposition with Mars retrograde. That opposition will not occur exactly until after 1 in the morning on Wednesday in the Pacific time zones. This would be very early in the morning, like 4 in the morning or so in the Eastern time zone. This combination of the moon on Tuesday moving from Pluto into Mars is going to activate some of these larger issues that have been going on for you with the Mars retrograde. And so it is possible, if you have a little conflict or some issues come up, and this could just be a passing thing. It could just be something frustrating like that comes up and you'll end up moving on from. But this also could be bringing up some deeper layers of things that just really need to come out and be processed. And this is going to be part of these much bigger changes that will eventually be coming out of this Mars Pluto opposition. What I also think could happen here, though, is something actually productive because we have been already adjusting to this opposition between Mars retrograde and Pluto. And so the moon moving through them and activating them here will be bringing things up again. But since we've already been adjusting to it, we are going to be able to come into some new relationships, whatever that is. And because we also have Mercury moving direct now in Sagittarius, and because the moon will move away from Mars into a trine with Mercury now moving direct in Sagittarius, we could really get something productive done here. And in fact, if you are having work to do, especially if it is involving language or writing or editing or research, but anything really, it could be something very mechanical, some sort of arts and craft project, or really any art, anything that really requires focusing your mind and attention without distraction and really getting into the work that you have to do. This movement of the moon across the opposition of Pluto into the conjunction with Mars and into the trine with Mercury on Wednesday can actually be really productive as long as you can avoid the kind of distracting conflicts that could drain your energy or to circumvent your ability to focus on something. If you can set things aside, kind of get yourself in this container of focus, this could be actually really productive. So then what is going to happen on Wednesday is the moon is going to be moving away from Mars. And around 10 in the morning in Pacific time, the moon will be getting in about 3 degrees away from an opposition with Venus, moving away from that trine with Mercury. So if you've had some kind of big issue come up with the Mars Venus opposition in the past week, this could be bringing up another layer of that or bringing in another storyline. But most likely, whatever's been going on with the Mars Pluto Venus series in the past week or so, I really think this is giving us some new opportunities to work on that, make some productive changes. And one of the main reasons is the fact that we have this beautiful flowing trine aspect coming together at the same time between Venus in Aquarius and Jupiter in Gemini. They'll be very close to forming the exact trine on Wednesday. And the moon will be not only opposing Venus, but then coming into a sextile with Jupiter. And so, really translating that connection between them. And so, rather than being really concerned about the moon setting off the Mars Pluto, I really think this is, again, giving us opportunities to really work with whatever's been going on. So then on Thursday, December 19th, the moon will be later in Leo. And in the morning, this is 8 a.m. in Pacific time, the moon will come into a square aspect with Uranus. This one is definitely more catalytic. Sometimes the moon squaring Uranus can go with a really random, unexpected event that kind of disrupts plans and you kind of have to take care of it. But the moon squares Uranus all the time, and that kind of thing doesn't happen. So, what we can expect, though, is something very invigorating in the mental field coming in here. And so, again, working on whatever you're doing this week, it's another aspect that I actually really like to generate a lot of forward momentum here. And that's because not only is the moon forming that square with Uranus, once the moon moves away from that square with Uranus, she's going to be starting to apply towards a trine with the sun. The moon's in the home of the sun, being received in a trine in this fire element, again, with Mercury moving direct in the fire element. So I like this fire, this creative generation to really get some movement, get some things really moving forward here with directionality. And then later on Thursday is when we get that beautiful exact trine aspect between Venus in Aquarius and Jupiter in Gemini. In Pacific time, this is going to happen a little bit after 6 o'clock p.m. So we're thinking really 9 o'clock in Eastern time zone. If you're further out in time, going to be in the middle of the night. So we can really think about Thursday night being the time when this Venus Jupiter trine becomes exact, while at the same time, the moon is coming into an exact trine with the sun. So Thursday night is a beautiful time if you want to go out with a partner or friend for dinner or something celebratory, or make a beautiful dinner for your partner or friend, or organize some sort of community event. Maybe there's some sort of solstice community get together you'd like to be part of. Do something to really structure in some joy and fun and pleasure. This is a beautiful night to do it. It is perfectly set up as a solstice celebration. Or, maybe you just want to spend some quiet time at home. Maybe you just want to be by yourself and get in your own space and do something fun. I mean, whatever is going to be enjoyable for you here. I would take advantage of this nice aspect we have with here on Thursday night. Then on Friday, the big change is the moon leaving that fire sign of Leo to enter Virgo. So the moon entering Virgo is a big shift this week because earlier we had the moon in Cancer, water sign, and then the moon in Leo, a fire sign. So now on Friday, the moon finally enters an earth sign. And if you've been looking at this chart while I've been talking, you've probably noticed there's not much in the earth element right now. The only planet in an earth element is Uranus, and Uranus is not a stable Earth's, resonant planet. Uranus is very volatile and really kind of volatilizes and shakes up the Earth element. So we can use some Earth. We can use the more practical, pragmatic focus. We can use that inner discernment of the Earth element, and especially the sign of Virgo. We have such an emphasis on Pisces right now with Saturn and Neptune. And of course, Virgo is the home and exaltation of Mercury. And we have Mercury finally moving direct this week. So on Friday, the moon will be moving into a square aspect with Mercury. And I think this day will be very important for working with whatever process you're in with Mercury. Mercury is at this point starting to pick up speed. And so, whatever you've been generating momentum from out of the Mercury retrograde, whatever you've been needing to change in your life and set in motion in a different way. Maybe that's because something got delayed, or you just realized something wasn't working and you had to go back and fix it, or develop some new type of approach to whatever it is. I think there's a lot of information coming here on this day. And again, if you are doing writing, communication, speaking, research, anything involving Mercury, really, it's a very active day with that moon Mercury square. And it can be actually very productive by getting into that focus. Of course, with the moon squaring Mercury, with that Mars retrograde applying to Pluto, be careful of verbal conflicts and disputes and that sort of thing. I'd avoid getting into anything that's not worth your time around that if you can. And so, really, that's the main thing with this Friday. And the other thing about this Friday is it's the day before the solstice. So, Saturday morning, December 21st, is when the sun will enter Capricorn, and we have the beautiful solstice day. So, the solstice is always a very powerful day for reflection and a ritual and community. You might have your own type of solstice tradition. And if you're somebody that does practice divination, and you may like to normally, if you can, make some space to do some divination about whatever's going on, or maybe looking into the year ahead on the solstice, I would strongly encourage you to do that this year, because this solstice chart is so strongly configured to the Jupiter and Saturn cycle that, again, is getting almost exact. Jupiter and Saturn are applying very closely to a square that will become exact 3 days later. The moon is in Virgo, moving into an opposition with Saturn, and then into a square aspect with Jupiter, moving away from Mercury. Mercury's moving into the Jupiter Saturn square as well here. So, divination here on this day, I think, will be very powerful for getting a sense of what's going on in your life and what you need to understand about the coming year and everything else going on. Otherwise, it's, the moon opposing Saturn, while getting a sense of these bigger patterns and focus we have for the years ahead, and that because of the Jupiter Saturn cycle, that can be very productive. Of course, the moon opposing Saturn is not always an easy aspect to experience. It is just a temporary passing aspect, but because the moon will be opposing Saturn and then the next day opposing Neptune, also keep track of not falling too much into despair, not becoming overly depressive, or having a scarcity Saturn type of mindset take over too much. So just track that and try to move yourself out of that space as much as possible. The Saturn opposition can be helpful again when we use it in a more pragmatic, practical way and tempering the excesses and inflations of Jupiter, and instead allowing that Jupiter quality that's activated here to help us find meaning in what we need to be letting go of, or what we're struggling with, or the solutions and creativity we can find within the limitations of Saturn. And then, of course, letting Saturn temper the excesses of Jupiter. The next day, on December 22nd, which is Sunday, the moon will be opposing Neptune at the very end of Virgo and then entering the sign of Libra. So, one of the things about this day is that the moon will be crossing over her own south node as soon as the moon enters Libra. But even at the beginning of the day, when the moon's at the end of Virgo and opposing Neptune, she's coming down across that south node. So at the same time, we're getting a sense of these bigger plans and visions of growth we might want to experience in the year ahead. We also very well could be experiencing a sense of loss and a letting go of what we know isn't working and we need to release. There could be some old dreams we've had about ourselves that we're realizing need to change. We no longer want that anymore. So once the moon enters Libra and then moves across that south node, she will be moving through a trine aspect with Pluto. And then later in the day on December 22nd, it's going to be around 6 o'clock in Pacific time. She will start applying closely to a sextile with Mars retrograde in Leo. So this is a really interesting combination these 2 days as the moon goes from Virgo into Libra, because she will be activating the Saturn Neptune, and then she will be activating the Mars Pluto, which really are two of the biggest agents of change kind of going on in the astrology right now. And as she moves away from that sextile with Mars and Leo, she'll then start applying towards a sextile with Mercury direct in Sagittarius. I love this aspect though, because I think this moon here will be getting us in touch with the Mars Pluto dynamic that's building, but in a way that is more integrative, can be more supportive for course correcting whatever we need to correct, or just getting a deeper sense of what we're letting go of. Because part of this Mars retrograde process with Pluto, it's going to be necessitating a letting go of certain things and a kind of melting down and reconfiguring of things, while eventually some really productive change will also be coming out of it. And so these more harmonious aspects with the moon and her moving across her south node right here, I think could bring some really good insight into whatever that is for you. Now, with her in Libra, what this does mean with Jupiter in Gemini and Venus in Aquarius is the next day on December 23rd, as the moon gets further into Libra, this is around 10 a.m. in Pacific time, she will be coming into an grand air trine or an air triangle with Venus in Aquarius and Jupiter in Gemini. And this will be happening on December 23rd, which is one day before that exact square aspect between Saturn and Jupiter. So there are, again, much bigger patterns of change that we are getting in touch with here. And I love this air triangle for mental ideas and getting inspiration. You might want to bring a journal with you, or something with your phone or something else to like record notes or record your voice if you get some kind of interesting idea. And so this air triangle between the moon in Libra, Venus in Aquarius, and Jupiter in Gemini that ends this week is not only ideal for the kinds of New Year's resolutions and holiday get-togethers that you might normally do this time of year, because the Jupiter Saturn square becomes exact the very next day on December 24th, there really is much larger insight into much larger plans for the future and who you want to be and what you want to do with your life that could be coming in here. And so I hope you find some inspiration and exciting ideas that you can develop because, like, as I've said many times, the astrology coming in 2025 is so massive with the change that it's something we're all going to need to embrace. In case you would like to have an astrology consultation and look at the year ahead, my books are open and you can book a session with me on my website, graycrawford.net. I'd love to work with you, so check that out. I'll have a link below that you can click on and check out my calendar. I also have a Patreon community that you can join, and I have a link below in the comments that you can click on to find out about my Patreon community. There's lots of educational content there and monthly meetings. And if you're on my Patreon and already supporting me, thank you so much for your support. It's really enabled me to persist with my astrological writing and astrological career. And I'm really excited about the year ahead and venturing into making video content now. Well, that's it for me. I hope you enjoy the solstice this week.